Before we get into the interface of ProPresenter, I want to talk a little bit about how ProPresenter works from a fundamental standpoint. The first thing to know about ProPresenter is that it is a layer-based product. What that means is there are up to, I believe, 7 different layers that content can live in at any given time. For our sake, we typically live within 3 layers. Let me show you these layers. In ProPresenter, the first layer that we deal with is the background layer. This can have any type of graphical content in it, whether it's a video, a slide, a motion background, any type of content that is a media content can live in the background layer. Here you see a motion background in our background layer as an example. The next layer is the foreground layer. This layer can contain any type of slide content, whether it's text, graphics, videos, any type of content that would be your typical slide content you will find in this layer. The final layer that we deal with frequently is the props layer. The props layer contains countdowns, messages, or any other overlaid content. We frequently use this layer for our service countdown, but it can be used in other situations. Now, when we take these 3 layers and we combine them, this is what we end up with. You can see how those 3 layers have been collapsed, and this is the output we would get by utilizing all 3 layers. The background layer, of course, is in the background, the foreground layer is in the middle, and the props layer is on top. So any content that you layer in these different layers will layer on top of the previous layer accordingly. Another thing to know about ProPresenter is that it is a queue-based system. A queue-based system works differently from a typical presentation software where each slide is its own thing, and each time you go to a new slide, you have to recreate all of the content that you did on the previous slide if you want to make just a slight change. In ProPresenter, it works differently. Because we have 3 different layers, we can trigger content on any of those layers at a time, and it will not affect the other layers in the system. So let me give an example. Here we have in our first queue, our first slide is a queue on the background layer, starting this video. So you can see in our sample output there that we've started this video. Now in our second queue, or our second slide, if I trigger text on the foreground layer, notice how it doesn't take away the background layer. The background layer still exists because we have not told the background layer to change in Q2. All we have done is told Q2 to add text to the foreground layer. Now if I want to change content in both of those layers, I can. So in Q3, we've changed both the foreground layer and the background layer. Now in Q4, or slide 4, we wanted to add a countdown. So we added that to the top. Notice how the lyrics and the background did not change, but the countdown was added to the top. This is how a queue-based system works. We can continually change different layers without affecting the other layers. This can become very powerful, but if you don't understand it, it can also become very tricky. What you'll find is that sometimes content in other layers may change unexpectedly, and that is most likely because you have set the content to change the wrong layer. This especially becomes important when looking at graphics and videos. If you have a video start on a background layer and then you add in another slide a picture on the foreground layer and you want the picture to be the only thing on the screen, you'll find that when you go from the background layer slide to the foreground layer slide, that both of them will stack and you'll have 2 layers going simultaneously. This is not the intended behavior, so you have to be really careful on what layers you're affecting at what times. And we'll talk more about this when we talk about creating slides.